Picture this. It's 5 years from now. You're scrolling through the news and you see a stock that's up 4,000%, and your stomach drops. Because you remember seeing this exact story. You remember someone mentioning it. You just didn't act. That's not hypothetical, by the way. That's happened to almost everyone watching this right now, including me. So here's the uncomfortable part. If you're worried about retirement, if inflation is quietly eating your savings faster than your investments are growing, if you feel like everyone else is getting ahead while you're standing still, I need you to listen to the next few minutes very, very closely, because what I'm about to show you isn't hidden. It's not some secret group chat. It's not a hedge fund memo nobody's supposed to see. It's a government announcement, a press release, a bunch of bureaucratic language so boring most people scrolled right past it. Meanwhile, Wall Street was distracted. The media was distracted. Retail investors were distracted. And wait until you hear what happened while everyone was looking the other way. More than $2 billion quietly started flowing into one specific sector. Not social media, not electric vehicles, not crypto, not even artificial intelligence, the thing everyone's already piled into. Quantum. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Quantum computing? Isn't that one of those science projects that's always 10 years away? Maybe. But that's not the question that matters. The question is this. Why is the United States government suddenly treating it like a national security emergency? Why are federal agencies willing to write checks worth hundreds of millions of dollars? And why did they choose specific companies to receive that support? Here's a quick disclaimer before we go further, because I take this seriously. Nothing in this video is financial advice, and quantum computing is speculative. Some of these companies could fail completely. I'm not telling you what to buy. I'm showing you how to think. What you do with it is on you. Now back to the story, because this next part is the reason I almost didn't sleep the night I found it. History tells us something important. Whenever the government starts aggressively funding technologies tied to national security, massive wealth creation often follows. The internet, GPS, semiconductors, defense contractors, aerospace. The pattern repeats over and over like clockwork, and almost nobody alive today caught more than one of those waves early. So here's what we're doing in the next 50 minutes. We're going to talk about the hidden lesson most investors, especially people trying to rebuild a retirement that inflation has quietly chipped away at, never learn. We're going to uncover why market cycles create enormous opportunity out of things that look boring or even ridiculous at first. We're going to examine exactly which quantum companies are receiving government support right now. And by the end, I'm going to tell you about one company that could become one of the biggest beneficiaries of all of this. I'm not naming it yet, and I want you to notice that I'm not naming it yet, because if I told you right now, you'd miss the entire reason it matters. You need the full picture first. So let's build it. Section 1. Why most people never get ahead. Let's start with an uncomfortable truth. Most people aren't behind on retirement because they don't work hard. Most people aren't struggling because they're lazy. Most Americans work incredibly hard. They wake up early. They stay late. They save what they can, even when there's barely anything left to save. They try to do everything right. Yet somehow the finish line keeps moving. Housing costs rise, food costs rise, insurance costs rise, healthcare costs rise faster than almost anything else, right when you'll need it most. Everything gets more expensive quietly year after year until one day you do the math on your retirement account and feel sick to your stomach. Meanwhile, they look around and see other people building real wealth. Stocks, real estate, businesses, and they ask the same question, almost word for word every single time. What am I missing? Wait until you hear the actual answer because it's not what you think. The answer isn't effort, it's timing. Most investors spend their entire lives chasing what already happened. Think about every major investing story of the last decade. When Nvidia became a household name, the biggest gains had already happened years earlier. When Bitcoin dominated every dinner table conversation, early adopters were already sitting on life-changing returns. When AI exploded into public awareness, institutional investors had been quietly positioning for years before the rest of us even knew the word ChatGPT. The crowd always arrives after the opportunity becomes obvious. The smart money arrives before. And that single sentence is the entire difference between people who retire comfortably and people who retire afraid. That's the biggest lesson in investing, full stop. Success isn't about predicting the future perfectly. It's about recognizing a shift before it's universally accepted while it's still boring, still confusing, still easy to dismiss. Which brings us to what's happening right now. Because quantum computing is still largely ignored by the average investor. Most people don't understand it. Most people don't follow it. Most people couldn't explain what it actually does if you asked them at a dinner party. And that right there is exactly why it deserves your attention. Not because it's guaranteed. Nothing in investing ever is, and if anyone tells you otherwise, that's your sign to leave. It deserves attention because it's early. And early is the only window that exists before everyone else shows up and the prices already reflect the good news. Section 2. The Lesson of Market Cycles. One of the biggest mistakes investors make, especially people who only have one real shot left to fix their retirement, is assuming today's winners stay winners forever. Markets don't work like that. Everything moves in cycles. Technology cycles, economic cycles, narrative cycles, investor sentiment cycles, everything. Think back just a few years. Remember when nobody cared about semiconductor companies? Remember when tech stocks were getting absolutely destroyed and pundits were writing obituaries for the entire sector? Remember when people were confidently declaring whole industries dead? Then the cycle changed. Suddenly everybody loved them again. Same companies, same products, same businesses. Wait until you hear what actually changed, because it wasn't the company. It wasn't the product. It was one thing and one thing only: perception. That's it. That's the whole secret. And perception drives markets far more than fundamentals ever do, at least in the short run. That's why so many investors, good, hardworking, careful people, end up losing money. They buy excitement. They don't buy value. They buy headlines. They don't buy opportunity. By the time everybody loves something, the easy gains are usually already gone, and the people buying in late are the ones funding the gains of the people who got there first. The greatest opportunities are almost always uncomfortable. They're ignored. They're misunderstood. Sometimes they're outright mocked on financial television. That discomfort is the price of admission. If everybody already agrees with you, you're probably too late, and worse, you're probably the exit liquidity for someone else's early position. The stock market rewards anticipation. It does not reward confirmation. And right now, we're watching the early innings of a brand new narrative cycle, one built entirely around strategic technology. Artificial intelligence, advanced semiconductors, space infrastructure, and now quantum computing. Keep that word in your head, strategic, because in the next section it's going to explain exactly why your tax dollars are already involved in this, whether you realized it or not. Section 3. Why the government is paying attention. Here's the question almost nobody is asking. Why does the government care this much? Governments don't hand out billions of dollars for fun. They don't wake up one morning and randomly choose an industry to support. They invest when they believe something matters strategically, when national competitiveness, defense, or economic dominance is on the line. And according to recent federal announcements, quantum technology now sits firmly in that category. Think about what that actually means. The government isn't saying quantum might be interesting someday in some distant future. They're saying it's important enough to fund today with real money right now. That distinction is the whole ball game. Wait until you hear how big the gap usually is between government decides this matters and the public catches on. Historically, that gap has been measured in years, sometimes a decade, because when governments start prioritizing a technology, they're often seeing possibilities far beyond what shows up in your news feed. National defense, cybersecurity, advanced manufacturing, medical breakthroughs, energy optimization, financial modeling. The list of potential applications is enormous, almost uncomfortably so. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The government didn't just support a vague sector. It selected specific companies. That one fact changes absolutely everything about how you should be thinking about this, because now investors aren't just evaluating, is quantum technology real? They're evaluating which specific businesses are positioned to benefit most from being handpicked by federal support. And history says federal backing can create powerful compounding advantages. Funding, research partnerships, defense contracts, regulatory credibility, industry leadership that's very hard for competitors to catch up to once it's established. All of these can stack on top of each other over time, the same way compound interest stacks, quietly, then suddenly. That's why this matters. Not because government backing guarantees success, it absolutely does not, but because it changes the odds. And in investing, especially when you're trying to make up for lost time on retirement, odds are everything. Section 4. The real meaning of government money. Most people hear government funding and think, great, free money for some company. That's not actually the important part. Wait until you hear what actually matters more than the check itself. The money matters, but the signal matters more. Let's imagine two companies. Both are small. Both are unprofitable today. Both are developing genuinely cutting-edge technology. One receives no government support at all. The other receives backing tied directly to national security priorities. Which company do investors trust more? Which company do future customers trust more? Which company is more likely to attract serious partners down the line? The answer is obvious the moment you say it out loud. Government support creates legitimacy. And legitimacy can become a real competitive advantage, especially in an industry this early and this widely misunderstood. Many quantum companies face deep skepticism right now. Investors worry about profitability. They worry about timelines slipping years into the future. They worry the whole thing never reaches commercial reality. Government backing doesn't erase those risks. I want to be very clear about that, it does not. But it changes the conversation. Instead of will this company even survive, people slowly start asking a different question. What happens if this company actually succeeds? That single shift in framing is, historically, where the biggest re-ratings in stock price have come from. Not from the company changing, from the question changing. And that's exactly the shift starting to happen here. Section 5. The quantum race nobody wants to lose. Let's zoom out for a second. This isn't really about one company. It's not even about one country. It's about competition, the kind that decides which nations are wealthy and powerful 50 years from now and which ones aren't. Countries that dominate critical technologies gain enormous lasting advantages, economic advantages, military advantages, strategic advantages that compound for generations. That's exactly why nations pour money into semiconductors, into artificial intelligence, into defense systems, into energy infrastructure, and now increasingly into quantum computing. Wait until you hear what becomes possible if this actually works the way researchers think it could. Imagine calculations that currently take years being solved in hours. Imagine breakthroughs in drug development that could add years to people's lives. Imagine entirely new materials, new energy systems, new levels of security that today's computers simply cannot reach, no matter how powerful they get. That's the promise driving this entire race. Will all of it happen exactly like that? Nobody honestly knows. I'm not going to sit here and pretend certainty that doesn't exist. But the potential is large enough that governments, not just one, multiple competing governments, have decided they cannot afford to ignore it. And whenever governments become unwilling to ignore something, investors should sit up and pay attention, because capital follows importance, and importance attracts opportunity. Section 6. The company that stands out now. Let's get into the part you've been waiting for. Remember that loop I opened at the very beginning and told you I wouldn't close yet? Here's where we finally close it. What makes this company interesting isn't simply that it operates in quantum. Plenty of companies can say that. It's what specifically it's building. Most people hear quantum and immediately picture computers in a lab somewhere. But there are other applications, and one of them might be more valuable, more immediate, and more government relevant than computing itself. Sensing and navigation. Imagine military aircraft operating without GPS. Imagine submarines functioning in environments where traditional navigation becomes unreliable or gets jammed entirely. Imagine systems that maintain full awareness even when every conventional signal around them is disrupted. Those capabilities matter enormously in modern defense, not someday, right now, in active planning. And that's exactly why investors are starting to circle this space, because military relevance tends to translate into government spending. Spending tends to translate into contracts. Contracts tend to translate into revenue. And revenue is what eventually translates into the kind of growth that shows up in a stock chart years later, looking obvious in hindsight. Notice the chain I just walked you through, because that chain is the whole opportunity. It's not the headline. It's everything that quietly happens after the headline while nobody's watching anymore. Future contracts, future partnerships, future demonstrations, future customers, future announcements that look small in the moment and enormous 2 years later. Every one of those is a potential catalyst, and markets love catalysts. This is not a recommendation to buy any specific stock. I want to repeat that clearly. This is me showing you the type of company in this type of position that historically has been worth watching closely and doing your own research on. Section 7. The bigger opportunity most people miss. Now here's the part I actually want you to remember a year from now, long after you've forgotten which sector we were even talking about. Even if you never buy a single quantum stock in your life, this story still matters, because it's teaching a much bigger lesson, one that applies to your retirement account no matter what you invest in. Wait until you hear how simple this actually is, because we've made it sound complicated, and it really isn't. The biggest wealth-building opportunities almost always begin before certainty arrives. People want certainty. Investors crave certainty. But certainty is expensive. By the time you have it, the price already reflects it. The largest gains tend to happen during uncertainty, during skepticism, during disbelief, during the exact phase where most people aren't paying attention because it still looks boring or unproven. That's why studying emerging trends matters, even the ones that don't pan out. Not because every trend wins, most don't, but because the occasional winner can change a retirement, a family's trajectory, an entire decade, and you only need to catch a small number of those in a lifetime for it to matter enormously. That's why opportunity recognition is the actual skill here, not stock picking luck. And that's exactly what we've been practicing in this video. Looking past headlines, looking past emotion, looking past short-term noise and dinner table hot takes, and asking one simple question over and over for the rest of your investing life. What could this become? Mic drop ending. So let's go back to where we started. 5 years from now, you're scrolling through the news and you see a stock that's up 4,000%. Here's my question for you, and I want you to actually sit with it, not just nod along. When that headline shows up, Are you going to be the person who says, I remember seeing that? Or are you going to be the person who actually did something about it? Because here's the part most finance channels won't tell you. It's not the people with the most money who win this game. It's the people with the most patience to act early and the discipline to actually follow through. Quick disclaimer, one more time because it matters. Nothing here is personalized financial advice. Quantum investing is genuinely speculative, and you should do your own research or talk to a licensed financial advisor before putting real money into anything we've discussed today. But the lesson stands regardless of what you do with this specific sector. The future doesn't announce itself with a press conference and a marching band. It announces itself quietly, in a government filing nobody read, in a press release that looked boring, in $2 billion that moved while everyone was watching something else. It whispers first, loudly, later to everyone who wasn't listening. The only question left is which group you're going to be in. If this helped you see something differently, that's exactly why I make these. Subscribe to Mintonomics because every single week we're going to keep doing this, finding the boring announcement before it becomes the obvious headline. Tell me in the comments, is quantum the next trillion-dollar industry or is it overhyped? I read every single one. I'll see you in the next video.